This week on Jerusalem Dateline, visiting U.S. Vice President Pence sets a time frame for moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, and Pence wows Israelis at the Knesset with his deep faith and knowledge of the Bible. Plus, hear what Jerusalemites have to say about President Trump's views on Jerusalem. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. After the White House recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital in December, President Trump sent Vice President Mike Pence to the Middle East with a mission to stand with Israel and also to reassure Arab allies that the U.S. has a vision for peace. In the eyes of many, he did both, with grace and confidence. Before Air Force Two ever sit down in the Middle East, the Vice President talked with CBN's David Brody about the reason for his trip.
If the world knows nothing else, the world should know this. Under President Donald Trump, America stands with Israel. And we'll be delivering that strong message. It was 70 years ago that the nation of Israel, in a miracle of history, came back into existence in its ancient homeland. And every day Americans have cherished that accomplishment, and we'll be there to celebrate that.
And celebrate he did, earning high praise from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
This is the first time that I stand here where both leaders can say those three words, Israel's capital, Jerusalem.
Pence became the first U.S. Vice President ever to be invited to address the Knesset. He kept his cool when Israeli Arab demonstrators protested the U.S. policy change toward Jerusalem.
It is deeply humbling for me to stand before this vibrant democracy.
He shared his heart, along with his reverence for the scriptures pertaining to Israel, and firmly restated the new U.S. policy.
Jerusalem is Israel's capital. And as such, President Trump has directed the State Department to immediately begin preparations to move the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Israeli President Reuven Rivlin called the Vice President a mensch, a very high compliment in Yiddish, meaning a person of integrity. Emotional visits to Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Memorial, and his prayers at the Western Wall sealed a visit like few others in the history of American diplomacy.
And the reason is that this administration is putting its embassy where its mouth is. For years and years, U.S. presidents and vice presidents, secretaries of state have all said, given lip service to Jerusalem as being the capital of Israel, but we never put it into practice. And this administration is saying that it will put it into practice. This has the potential to be the most significant visit by a vice president to any nation in recent U.S. history.
Pence also promised change is coming to the U.S.-signed nuclear deal with Iran. That will put Washington on a collision course with European allies who are doing big business with Iran.
We are sending a signal to our European allies that the time has come for changes in the Iran nuclear deal that will ensure that the sunset provisions in the deal are completely eliminated, and that punitive sanctions will be available for many years to come to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. And you have our commitment to work closely with our allies around the world to achieve that.
And with boycotts and curses, Palestinian leaders have set a hostile course against Washington on the international stage. But the coming debate will show the U.S. and Israel largely united over the city King David made his capital more than 3,000 years ago. Joining me to talk more about the Mike Pence visit is CBN Senior Editor John Waggi. John, you were here for the entire visit by Mike Pence here in Jerusalem. What was your reaction?
Well, Chris, I think if you can call any trip by a vice president a tour de force, this was it. It was beautifully orchestrated, and he was so natural all the way through, even in the face of protests and boycotts. What he said was something that will last for a long, long time.
And you said that it's not just a political tour, but a personal pilgrimage in some sense.
Yes, it did, with his wife there at his side every step of the way, and you knew they loved being here, and even in their wave at the end, it looked like they were sorry to leave Israel. Israel, and you know, I think they'll be back sometime in a less official capacity.
Yeah, and certainly emotional at Yad Vashem and the Western Wall.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And things have developed since then. A few days later, President Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and here's a bit of what he had to say.
When they disrespected us a week ago by not allowing our great vice president to see them, and we give them hundreds of millions of dollars in aid and support, tremendous numbers that nobody understands. That money is on the table, and that money is not going to them unless they sit down and negotiate peace.
John, what do you think of Trump's statement that the Palestinian leadership disrespected Vice President Pence?
Well, I think in part it's genuine anger on his part and on others in his administration like Nikki Haley. They're upset that he wasn't even given a hearing while he was here. And I think Pence's personality contributes to that because he is such a amenable person. Also, I think it's partly Trump the street brawler as well, telling the Palestinians there are consequences to their behavior.
And Trump the deal maker as well.
Absolutely, right. But you know, Chris, no matter what gets said in the coming days and weeks, and there will be clashes and there will be differences of opinion on all sides, what happened here really cannot be changed. It's marked in history now. Vice President Pence connected heart, soul, spirit with the Israeli people, and that is something that if we believe the promises of what the Lord has for this city and for this land, for Israel in coming years, this is something that will go down in history as a real page turner, I think.
Yeah, and maybe one of the most historic visits by a vice president in diplomatic history.
Yes, yes. It's hard to think of another. Maybe Nixon to Latin America, but that had a whole different feel to it.
Right. Well, thank you, John. Appreciate your expertise and look forward to your next visit here in Jerusalem.
Thank you, Chris. It was a privilege to be here during this week.
Yeah. Thanks, John. You know, many people did say the speech by Vice President Mike Pence at the Knesset was historic. One observer say it was the most Zionist speech by a non-Jew in the Knesset. Here's an excerpt from that speech.
Your story inspired my forebears to create what our 16th president called a new birth of freedom. And down through the generations, the American people became fierce advocates of the Jewish people's aspiration to return to the land of your forefathers. To claim your own new birth of freedom in your beloved homeland. The Jewish people held fast to a promise through all the ages, written so long ago, that even if you'd been banished to the most distant land under the heavens, from there he would gather and bring you back to the land which your fathers possessed. Through a 2,000-year exile, the longest of any people anywhere, through conquests and expulsions, inquisitions and pogroms, the Jewish people held on to this promise. And they held on to it through the longest and darkest of nights. A night Elie Wiesel proclaimed 7 times sealed. A night that transformed the small faces of children into smoke under a silent sky. A night that consumed the faith of so many, that challenges the faith of so many still. And tomorrow, when I stand with my wife at Yad Vashem to honor the 6 million Jewish martyrs of the Holocaust, we will marvel at the faith and resilience of your people, who just 3 years after walking beneath the shadow of death rose up from the ashes to resurrect yourselves, to reclaim a Jewish future, and to rebuild the Jewish state. And this April, we will mark the day when the Jewish people answered that ancient question: can a country be born in a day? Can a nation be born in a moment?
as the State of Israel celebrates the 70th anniversary of its birth.
Coming up, hear what Jerusalemites have to say about President Trump's recognition of their city. Following Mike Pence's visit, CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl asked both Jewish Israeli Jerusalemites as well as Arab residents of Eastern Jerusalem what they think about President Trump's recent recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, also the visit of Vice President Mike Pence, and the possibility for peace.
We spoke to Jewish Israeli residents of Jerusalem at Machane Yehuda, the city's open-air market.
What do you think about President Trump's declaration that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel?
I feel that he supports the state of Israel not only by words, by deeds.
Jerusalem has been our capital for many years, and I think for centuries, I think it's about time that a president declared it and recognized it.
Finally, we have a president that has the guts to say the truth.
I'm for it 100%. I'm a fan of the President Trump, definitely on that.
So what do you think about the visit of Mike Pence, of the vice president?
He created a tremendous traffic in the city. That's one thing, okay? I think it was a positive step from the America, administration.
He identifies so close with Israel, with our struggles, with our problems. We are very grateful for his understanding.
I think it was a very historical moment in our history. I believe he was the first vice president to be invited to speak at the Israeli Knesset. I think he did an amazing job. He was very respectful, and I think that it just made our ties with the United States of America even stronger.
Do you think there can be a peace between Israel and the Palestinians?
So I don't know if the solution is within a two-state, to have two different states, but I do think there can be peace. It just has to come from both sides.
It's very difficult to envision it now because I'm not sure what the other side planning for the future. I'm ready for the peace.
We also spoke to Arab residents of Jerusalem near the old city's Damascus Gate.
Mahmoud, what do you think about President Trump's declaration about Jerusalem?
Of course, he's wrong.
Yeah.
That's not good from him to say that and to do that.
When President Trump declares this as the eternal capital of Israel, like he's asking himself or he's giving himself a license to rewrite history.
What about the visit of Vice President Pence?
The way I saw it is adding insult to injury. It just added more fuel to the fire.
Do you think there's still a possibility for peace?
Of course. Yes, we hope.
There's always a possibility. But the problem here is two people here have this small sliver of the Middle East, piece of land no larger than the state of Illinois probably, or something like this. We have to coexist. It's that simple, And President Trump's decision did not make it any closer. On the contrary, he made it harder to attain.
Well, Jerusalem, it's for the whole world. I don't see what's wrong, but I could say one thing, God bless America.
Okay.
Up next, we talk with best-selling author and Middle East analyst Joel Rosenberg about the Pence visit.
So I think Israelis and American evangelicals are going to be very, very excited about this speech. And it was a long speech, and it was a detailed.
One of those in the Knesset gallery watching and listening to Vice President Mike Pence's speech was Joel Rosenberg. I talked with Rosenberg here in our Jerusalem studio just after the speech. So joining us here in our studio is Joel Rosenberg, best-selling author and Middle East analyst. Joel, great to have you here.
Great to be with you, Chris.
Actually, you were in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, and heard Vice President Mike Pence deliver what I would say was a historic speech. What was your reaction to his speech?
It was a historic speech, in part because no vice president of the United States has ever addressed the Knesset. It's not a typical thing when American leaders come over, unless you're the president of the United States, to give a speech, and even most presidents don't do it. So it was an important speech, and I thought he hit a grand slam home run. I think the challenge is which lens are you watching the speech? If you're watching the speech as an Israeli, or as many, but not all, evangelicals, you're going to be excited about the speech. The Trump-Pence administration has strengthened the Israeli alliance as a strategic goal. Like they're working through a series of things to try to make the relationship better after it was so badly strained. I mean, nearly a train wreck under the Obama-Biden years. Okay, so I think Israelis and American evangelicals are going to be very, very excited about this speech. And it was a long speech, and it was a detailed speech, and it covered many bases. If you're a Palestinian, you're going to be furious, most Palestinians. And if you're Jordan, Egypt, where the vice president just was, I'm not sure you're going to be happy about it either. The vice president did speak a lot about peace and the importance of peace and America as a peacemaker, right? To me, the headline for me was the idea that the vice president said, it seems impossible to make peace. There are so many cynics, and it's understandable. But the United States has helped Israel and Egypt make peace and enduring peace already. And the United States has helped broker a peace treaty that has lasted and is durable between Israel and Jordan. It can be done. Heroes of the past made hard choices and they made peace work. Could it be done with the Israelis and the Palestinians? The vice president said it could be, and we stand ready. We want the Palestinians to come back to the table. I think that was important. Now, whether that will offset the anger that many in the Arab world have about the Jerusalem decision, I'm not sure it will overcome that anger.
And you have met with both of those leaders, Egyptian President El-Sisi. Actually, we covered that that trip back in November.
Thank you for coming to Cairo to cover that.
It's a great historic meeting as well. And then you've also met with King Abdullah personally, and also with that group as well. So how did he thread the needle? And you mentioned that in your article with those two countries, Jordan and Egypt.
The Jerusalem Post op-ed that was published Sunday here in Israel, I said the vice president has a difficult needle to thread. How do you speak to all these audiences at once? My recommendation to the vice president was to not come and take a victory lap. That you've got to talk about peace, you've got to talk about the hard choices, the compromises both sides are going to need to make. Otherwise, it's going to, even while the vice president just sat down with President El-Sisi in Cairo and with King Abdullah in Jordan, and I think he made progress in talking in great detail and listening to their concerns. That was good. But if the speech here seemed too one-sided, it could damage the progress that he just made over the last few days. I think the jury's going to be out. I think it's going to take some time. But I thought the speech was very good. The vice president made it very clear. In fact, he accentuated some points that President Trump made in his Jerusalem announcement on December 6th. Namely, two key points. One, that while the United States recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the boundaries of Jerusalem are yet to be determined by a final agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. I don't think most people in the Arab world heard the speech, I don't think they watched it, or read it. So what they heard as a headline was, Trump gives Jerusalem to the Jews, which was infuriating to them. But that nuance of, hey, we haven't defined the exact boundaries of Jerusalem yet, that was what the president said in December, and the vice president really underscored that today, as I know that he has in Egypt and Jordan.
If you'd like to see our entire interview with Joel Rosenberg, you can see that on our Jerusalem Dateline Facebook page. Up next, highlights from Vice President Pence's visit in Israel. During his visit, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence held a number of meetings and visited emotional sites like Israel's Holocaust Memorial and the Western Wall. Here's a look back at his historic visit.
It is deeply humbling for me to stand before this vibrant democracy, and the friendship between our peoples has never been deeper. And I am here to convey a simple message from the heart of the American people. America stands with Israel. We stand with Israel because your cause is our cause. Your values are our values. And your fight is our fight. We stand with Israel because we believe in right over wrong, in good over evil, and in liberty over tyranny. And our founders, as others have said, turned to the wisdom of the Hebrew Bible for direction, guidance, and inspiration. Our second president, John Adams, declared that the Jews, in his words, had done more to civilize man than any other nation. It was here in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah that Abraham offered his son, Isaac, and was credited with righteousness for his faith in God. It was here in Jerusalem that King David consecrated the capital of the Kingdom of Israel. And since its rebirth, the modern state of Israel has called this city the seat of its government. Jerusalem is Israel's capital. And as such, President Trump has directed the State Department to immediately begin preparations to move the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Sheheki anu, viki amanu, vihig iyanu, lazman hazeh.
During the visit of Mike Pence, CBN News had the privilege of being in the press pool covering the vice president. We had the sense that history was unfolding before our eyes. It also was an encouragement to continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and all the peoples of this land. Well, that's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.